update because we are privileged to have Lloyd Pulley here. Lloyd Pulley is the pastor of Calvary Chapel Old Bridge in New Jersey. He will be our guest speaker for both of our Sunday morning services. Of course, this is after the Pastors Conference. We have a great lineup of teachers that are coming here to Hawaii for this upcoming conference, and I was able to get Lloyd Pulley, who is one of the best Bible teachers that we have today. So that is next Sunday, the 21st, for both of our Sunday morning services. The second thing I want to do is follow up on our building update from July 31st. I just want to let you know that we really covet your prayers for two matters, one of which is the permit problem that we're having, and it's not the problem of the city and county. They have been just really great, and but we still have some issues nonetheless that need to be resolved. They're very serious in nature. The second is for the finances, the needed finances in order to cross the finish line and get into our building. We really covet your prayers in that regard. Now, for those of you who have given and continue to give, please know that we are so thankful to you. We cannot even begin to thank you enough. We are moving forward by faith. We are trusting that God is going to provide everything we need. We've been able heretofore to pay for all of the renovation with cash on hand, out of pocket, without borrowing money. And so we're just going to trust that the Lord somehow, some way is going to provide everything we need so that we can be in our church as early as October with air conditioning. So just, again, we covet your prayers in that regard. All right, let's get to our prophecy update. Today, I'm going to do something a little bit different in that I'm going to present what I'll call forensic evidence as it relates to Bible prophecy. And by forensic evidence, I mean proof beyond a reasonable doubt that specific Bible prophecies that even a few years ago were not where they're at today. And where they're at today, I believe, is that they are on the cusp of being fulfilled. The prophecies I'm speaking of chiefly are two prophecies, the first of which is Isaiah 17 concerning Syria. More specifically, the prophecy concerning Damascus becoming a ruinous heap, completely destroyed, so much so that it is uninhabitable. And the second prophecy that I believe is on the cusp of being fulfilled is Ezekiel 38. This is a major key prophecy, and I don't think you can overstate the importance of and significance of the recent developments concerning Turkey. I'll include Iran and especially Russia. And that's what I want to talk about today, and not only about why I believe that we're about to see them fulfilled, but why it matters, what it really means to us. Now, first, I need to proceed with the presupposition that we're all in agreement that it's Russia and Iran and not Turkey and Iran who are at the helm of Ezekiel 38. Now, the reason being is that there is a teaching now that is starting to gain some traction, sadly, that the Antichrist will come out of Islam, and that it is not Russia and Iran at the helm of Ezekiel 38, but it's Turkey instead of Russia. Now, listen, with all due respect, if the jury is still out for you on this one point, then I would just respectfully refer you to our in-depth prophecy update back on July 24th. Also, I would refer you to last weekend's prophecy interviews that Amir and I did Facebook Live, in which we answer that question, and Amir offers his insight into why it is that it is not Turkey at the helm. It is Russia and Iran, and Turkey is certainly involved, and that is the case that I want to argue today. And I want to present the evidence as to why it is that beyond a reasonable doubt, it has to be Russia and Iran with Turkey. I'll begin with Exhibit A. You'll forgive the legal jargon here, but Exhibit A is the thawing between Russia and Turkey. Yesterday, the Jerusalem Post referred to Putin and Erdogan as the odd couple. Some of you that are older remember that sitcom, The Odd Couple? You younger people have no idea, but there was a sitcom. It was actually very good. Quoting the Post, the Russo-Turkish thaw is bad news for Washington, Brussels, and interesting, Syria's Kurds. It seems that because Russia is Turkey's sole gas supplier, did you know that? Erdogan was left with no other alternative but to come crawling to one Vladimir Putin, which is exactly what he did. He had to. He had no choice. According to the Post, though Russia stopped short of shutting the spigots, Erdogan had to consider such a prospect, speaking of the gas, because Russia had displayed elsewhere its willingness to do such things. Having said this, the deal's economics are but its appetizer. The main course is about, listen, America, Europe, and Syria. Yet, there is a deeper reason for Putin and Erdogan to fall in each other's arms. Both have a problem with America's global hegemony, and both feel personally betrayed by Barack Obama. The Post goes on to cite Obama's betrayal of Putin as stemming from Washington's conduct vis-a-vis Ukraine and Libya, and Erdogan's as the belief that the U.S. masterminded the coup against him recently through his nemesis, self-exiled cleric Tahula Gulen, which, by the way, parenthetically, let me say, Iran is demanding that we send this Gulen back to Turkey. He is exiled here of his own volition in the United States of America, and this man is a very powerful man, a very dangerous man. And I'll add that there are recent leaks that show Hillary Clinton and this man being very chummy. I'll just leave it at that. Have a nice afternoon. Let's go on with the article. These circumstantial concerns are fueled by the ideological misgivings about, and this is interesting, the current world order. Interesting. The article then goes on to ask the question of, where then does all of this leave Israel? Good question. Here's the answer they give. The reproachment's simplest and happiest aspect, as seen from Jerusalem, is its economic side. Please, as I present this evidence, keep in mind the details that we have in Ezekiel 38. What is the purpose of this attack against Israel in Ezekiel 38? It's to take a spoil, a spoil. So it has economic implications. The article says, depoliticized trade anywhere in the Middle East is an Israeli interest. Besides that, Israel's future gas sales to Turkey should not be affected by the Putin-Erdogan deal, as Ankara's need to end its dependency on Russian gas remains unchanged. There has been some speculation in recent weeks that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been cultivating his ties with Putin and has now also mended fences with Erdogan, is seeking a Russian brokered deal on Syria, that will somehow involve the Golan Heights. That is, of course, speculation even more than a Putin-Erdogan embrace was only last month. In other words, that could likely happen. Who would have ever predicted Putin and Erdogan as this odd couple coming together? These were fierce foes, fierce foes. Well, as you might imagine, this newfound reconciliation between Russia and Turkey was met with consternation and even trepidation on the part of Israel and, of course, on the part of the United States as well. On Thursday, the Jewish press published an article titled, "Moscow Calming Israeli American Fears of Russia-Turkey-Iran Coalition." Did you catch that? Just call me silly. I've been called worse. Call me silly. But is that not exactly what Ezekiel 38 says? Quoting the press, Tuesday's meeting in St. Petersburg between the two former feuding foes, Russian President Putin and Turkish President Erdogan, drew considerable attention. Government-run news agency TASS reported, noting that the Russian-Turkish rapprochement is coming while Russia has been expanding its relations with Iran, and Ankara and Tehran have also been bridging the gaps between them, borne by almost 4 decades of a volatile Islamic republic on Turkey's border. You know, it wasn't that long ago when we first started doing these prophecy updates back in 2006 that one of the unknowns was, how is Turkey going to get and turn this corner so they're allied with Russia and Iran? Yeah. We need to look no further than to what is happening now. Quoting again the press, in fact, right after the failed coup last month, Erdogan announced, "We are determined to cooperate with Iran and Russia." Oh my goodness. Here's why: to address regional problems. And listen to what he says, I'm quoting, "side by side, and to step up our efforts considerably to restore peace and stability in the region." Is that not 1 Thessalonians 5:3? While they are saying peace and stability, peace and safety, peace and security, sudden destruction will come upon them as a woman travailing in labor. Hang on to that. I want to come back to that in a moment. Okay, this brings us to Exhibit B, which is the evidence of the situation in Syria. Please, I hope you see Syria as a nexus, as a catalyst, if you prefer. Syria is so strategically important, so significant prophetically, geographically, as it relates to the current and present situation in Israel today. So, also on Thursday, Ynet News reported on Turkey's offer of joint anti-Islamic State strikes with Russia. According to the report, and by the way, this came about subsequent to the coup. How long ago was the coup? What, 3 weeks ago now? In the last 3 weeks, things have just come together with breakneck speed. Unbelievable. It's stunning, really. According to the report, Turkey's foreign minister says his country has called on Russia to carry out joint operations against the Islamic State group in Syria. Comments came on Thursday, days after Erdogan visited St. Petersburg for talks with Russia's Vladimir Putin. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, it gets better. You'll forgive me for referencing the Huffington Post, of whom I am not a fan at all. However, it's incumbent upon me to do so by virtue of it being Exhibit C, which is the evidence of Iran, who stands at the ready to attack Israel. According to the Post, the tension between Israel and Iran appears to be heightening. Hossein Salami, deputy commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, recently said, Hezbollah has, listen, 100,000 missiles that are ready to hit Israel to liberate the occupied Palestinian territories if the Zionist regime repeats its past mistakes. You know where Hezbollah is, right? And by the way, I hope you understand that Hezbollah in Lebanon, my birthplace, Lebanon, and Hamas in the West Bank and Gaza, they are but fingers on the arm of Iran. When you say Hezbollah, you are saying Iran. This is Iran in the form of Hezbollah. Well, the article goes on to say, he added, today, the grounds for the annihilation and collapse of the Zionist regime are present more than ever. Salami warned that if Israel made the wrong move, it would come under attack. A few weeks ago, a senior advisor to the IRGC's elite Quds force, Ahmed Karimpour, said Iran could destroy Israel in less than 8 minutes if Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei gave the order. You know what's sad? The writer of this piece for the Huffington Post, who himself is a Muslim originally from Iran, goes on to dismiss Iran's threats as mere rhetoric. However, I would submit that his attempts at doing so merely furthers the deceptive propaganda instead. Last night I was watching a documentary on Hitler's Olympics, and I was kind of taken back by how much of what we have in the ceremonies now of the Olympics today were started by Hitler. The passing of the torch, Hitler started that whole thing, that big, grand, thing. And the reason I mention it is I shouldn't watch documentaries like that on Saturday night before I go to bed, before a Sunday morning. But secondly, and more importantly, what came out of that was so fascinating because it was all propaganda. It was all propaganda. And it was brilliant in a satanic way. Hitler's propaganda was brilliant in a satanic way. Well, speaking of deceptive propaganda, the Times of Israel published a report yesterday in which they quote Netanyahu, who categorically rejected Obama's assertion that Israel now supports the Iran Accord. Did you hear about this? I hope you understand what propaganda is, right? So here's the propaganda coming out of the White House from the President of the United States. Oh, Israel now sees the merit of this deal. Israel is now on board with the nuclear deal with Iran. I'm not going to go there. Are you? Never mind. According to the Times, far from accepting Obama's assertion, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel's stance had not changed, while the Israeli Defense Ministry compared the accord to, get this, the Munich Agreement signed by the European powers with Nazi Germany in 1938. And look at what that led to. I think it's, as one said, deja vu all over again. Is that a redundancy? Well, it is. It's exactly what is happening. Enter Exhibit D. This is further forensic evidence that Ezekiel 38 is on the cusp of being fulfilled, and it has to do with none other than Saudi Arabia. And I really need you to think through this with me, because in verse 13 of Ezekiel 38, we have this mention of Sheba and Dedan, which we know is the ancient name for the region today known as Saudi Arabia. Now, what's so interesting about verse 13 with respect to Saudi Arabia is that when Russia, Iran, Turkey et al. Attack Israel, Saudi Arabia only protests. They only ask, basically, what are you doing? Why are you attacking? Is it to take a spoil? Now, why is that so significant? Because it would indicate that Saudi Arabia would have an amicable relationship with Israel and warm up to Israel prior to the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38. I submit to you that this is exactly what is happening as we speak. This is in some regards more stunning than Turkey's alignment in recent weeks. It's Saudi Arabia warming. You can't be a Jew in Saudi Arabia. A Christian in Saudi Arabia cannot have a Bible. There are no churches in Saudi Arabia. There are no synagogues in Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is warming up to Israel? Yes, they are. Just in time. Right on schedule. Well, the Times of Israel on Friday published a report on how some in the Saudi media are actually criticizing anti-Semitism and as such warming up to Israel. Kindly allow me to just share a couple of excerpts real quickly here. A media campaign in Saudi Arabia is seeking to combat anti-Semitism in the kingdom, apparently in an effort to prepare public opinion for deepened relations with decades-old enemy Israel. Ehud Yassari, a senior analyst, on Friday read out examples of key sentences in recent articles by Saudi columnists and reporters demonstrating a shift in attitude towards the Jewish state and Jews in general. I mean, this is almost surreal. Saham al-Qahtani, a famous Saudi columnist, recently wrote that describing Jews as the son of apes and pigs, by the way, that's what the Muslims call the Jews, they're not even human, and other derogatory descriptions of Jews from the Quran, no less, relates to the period in which, I love how they get out of this, Islam's holiest book was written and should not be seen to refer to all Jews today. Oh, okay. This interpretation of the Quran is not in line with previous interpretations, which take the phrase comparing Jews to animals quite literally. Similarly, Yasser Hijazi, columnist in the influential paper Riyadh, this is one of the major publications, said that Arabs must, quote, leave behind their hostility and hatred of Jews. Saudi Arabia. Another columnist, Ibrahim el-Matrudi, was quoted as complaining that Saudis and Arabs in general have been swearing at the Jews instead of drawing benefits from studying their success. And it gets better. Ahmed Adnan, writing in the influential Saudi-owned pan-Arab website Al Arabiya, argued that Saudis should speak to Israel in line with their own national interests and without mediators. The change in tone in Saudi rhetoric towards Israel comes a year after signing, no surprise, the nuclear agreement between Iran and world powers. Last year in June, when they put ink on this agreement with Iran, I made the comment that the implications and ramifications of this nuclear agreement could never be overstated. This is so significant, and it crosses a line for which it puts us and the world past, I believe, the point of no return. It's almost like it's set in motion faster, even faster, all of the things that we're seeing now a year later. In late July, this was just a couple weeks ago, a retired Saudi general visited Israel, heading a delegation of academics and businessmen seeking to encourage discussion of the Saudi-led Arab Peace Initiative, Such a visit by former General Eshki, who was once a top advisor to the Saudi government, is, and I quote, an extremely rare occurrence. I think that is an understatement. This is unheard of. This is unheard of. If you were to ask me, even a year ago, concerning Saudi Arabia, and you were to tell me that they would be doing this, I would have questioned you, and I would have been dismissive of you. Even I would have. And I would like to think I'm pretty open-minded when it comes to Bible prophecy, but I wouldn't have believed it. If you would have told me that almost with a stroke of a pen, Turkey would be aligned as they are now with Russia and Iran, I would have had a really hard time believing that it would happen this way and this fast. Well, here's where I'm going with this, and I want to sort of bring it to a close and answer this question of what does this all mean to us? When the alarm clock goes off tomorrow morning, how does this apply to us? Why is this important to us? What does this mean to us? Now, I realize that I once again run the risk of providing an oversimplification with my answer, but I'm going to attempt to explain it as best as I possibly can. In a sentence, the reason this matters to us, the reason the situation in Syria, Isaiah 17, and the situation in Russia, Iran, Turkey, related to Israel in Ezekiel 38 matters to us is because the rapture of the church takes place close in proximity to the fulfillment of Ezekiel chapter 38, and with it, Isaiah chapter 17. One of the questions I'm often asked about is, when does the rapture take place in terms of the timing of Ezekiel 38? Now, having Amir here last week was great because he and I over lunch discussed Ezekiel 38 in great detail. He had some interesting insight, and I'm coming to the conclusion that nobody can be dogmatic on the timing of the rapture in relationship to Ezekiel 38. I lean towards the rapture happening prior to the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38. I also believe it's plausible that the rapture could happen in concert with the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38. In other words, at the same time. And others suggest that it happens after. Again, we cannot be dogmatic about it. We don't know. There are some details that we have in Ezekiel 38 that we can draw some conclusions from, but the fact of the matter is we can't say for a certainty that the rapture is right before Ezekiel 38, in concert with Ezekiel 38, or shortly after Ezekiel 38. But here's what we can surmise. It is close in proximity to Ezekiel 38. Do you see where I'm headed with this? The common denominator is, if Ezekiel 38 and its fulfillment is that close, and the rapture happening is close in proximity to the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38, then how close are we? How close are we? Wouldn't it stand to reason that if we're seeing everything now coming together very quickly for Ezekiel 38 to be fulfilled, and the rapture's close in proximity to that fulfillment, that we're also very close to the rapture of the church? I hope that I've provided sufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this, in fact, is the case. Luke 21, verse 28, Jesus said, when you see these things, keyword, begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. I believe with all my heart that Jesus was referring to prophecies like Ezekiel 38 and others with them when he said this. He had this in mind. when you see prophecies like Ezekiel 38 beginning to come to pass, look up and lift up your heads, because that is the sign that your redemption draws nigh, and I'm coming. If you don't know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you have never called upon the name of the Lord, today more so than ever, I really implore you to do so. Well, Pastor, you've been saying that the rapture of the church is very close, can happen at any time, for like 10 years now. No, I haven't. It's been 11 years, actually, I've been doing it. Sorry. You know, one of these days, I won't be saying that anymore, because it will have happened. Have happened. And though selfishly, I have to confess that when it does happen, I want my Jesus to say to me, good job. Good job. See, I'm going to be held to a stricter account than will you, with what I did every Sunday that I had the privilege to teach God's holy word and to pastor God's holy people. And I want my Jesus, my Savior, to say to me, well done, good and faithful servant. You did not cower in the face of the times in which you lived, to warn my people, to ready my people, to steady my people for my return. That's the job I gave you to do. That's what I called you to, and you were faithful to do it. Is that selfish or what? Yes, it is. I'm off the hook. Now it's on you. Now it's on you. Why don't you all stand and we'll pray. Father in heaven, thank you for the patience of your people. Thank you for the sense of humor that your people have. And Lord, more importantly, infinitely more importantly, thank you for Bible prophecy. Lord, thank you for the purpose of Bible prophecy. Thank you for telling us in your word what the world is going to look like at the time of the end before you return for your church. Because now, as we look at the world in which we live, we realize that it is exactly as you said it would be, and that our redemption draws nigh. Lord, I pray if there's anybody in this wonderful church that is my privilege to pastor, or if there's anybody watching this online that has never called upon you, I pray that they would call upon you today, believing in their heart and confessing with their mouth that they too would be saved. In Jesus' name, amen.